Surveillance is everywhere nowadays. It is in our homes, in the classroom, in our workplaces, in public spaces, and in our relationships with other people. We carry it with us at all times, and it follows us virtually everywhere. It is visible and invisible, pervasive and seamless. Surveillance involves the creation of data. It could either be data about a certain individual, a group, or an organization, or it could be indiscriminate data that does not prescribe in advance a specific target of surveillance. There is no limit to a given individual's or organization's thirst for data, which partially explains why surveillance practices are constantly expanding. Another part of this expansion should be credited to the constant entry of more and more new players into the world of surveillance. This may be your favorite pizza shop which suddenly started to ask you for additional data when you order a pie, your municipality whose services are increasingly being given after digital identification, or you yourself who decided to use social media to see what your ex is up to. Surveillance is a powerful tool that enables one to do things that otherwise are either hard or impossible to achieve, which explains why more and more people are experimenting with surveillance or flat out doing it. While the word surveillance usually has bad connotations, surveillance is actually value-free and can be utilized both for good as well as for bad. For instance, while surveillance can be used in order to deny a person certain human rights, surveillance may also be used in order to monitor a person's health and save a person's life. Of course, there's a lot of gray areas in which one person considers a specific use as doing good, while another perceives it as detrimental. The study of surveillance has grown exponentially in the last 2 decades. This has much to do with the microprocessor revolution, the entry of digital devices into every household, and the online revolution. It also has to do with large initiatives of powerful organizations to use surveillance for a myriad of economic and state functions. As surveillance practices have multiplied in number and became more pervasive, so did the fascination with the phenomena and the general scholastic attention that it received. But what exactly is surveillance? This term is actually rather hard to define nowadays, specifically due to the previous mentioned expansion in the study of surveillance. As the field expands, the term surveillance is applied to a larger set of phenomena. Therefore, if we wish to offer a contemporary definition that will encompass all types of current surveillance practices, we need an inclusive definition. One such definition may be the human-initiated purposeful tracking and recording of data directed at elements of interest and applied in order to produce certain effects. At first glance, this seems an odd definition, lacking some of the characteristics that we tend to associate with surveillance. For instance, why not say the tracking of people? After all, people are usually the ones who are tracked. While it is true that individuals are most often the targets of surveillance, there are also other targets for such practices, namely organizations, animals, and the environment. Thus, limiting the definition to individuals would exclude a portion of what is now considered surveillance. We can, however, say that surveillance is always initiated by humans, and it is put in place in order to serve some interest of certain humans. In order to be considered surveillance, the tracking should be purposeful as opposed to unintentional or accidental observation. For instance, stumbling upon a revealing piece of information such as a secretive workplace memo wrongly sent to you, should not be considered surveillance. Yet finding out the same piece of information after tracking the workplace database for secretive memos can be considered surveillance. Hence, both the intention to track and the activeness in carrying it out are pertinent criteria. As mentioned before, surveillance involves the creation of data. Indeed, even when no long-lasting data is created, after all, not every CCTV is actually connected to anything, and some of the data that is collected by means of surveillance is perishable, the potential of data collection is ever present and may create its own effect. The collected data can be either defined in advance, such as by creating a program that will intercept every email that mentions a certain word, or not, in which case all possible data is collected and sorted out later. Objects of surveillance, on their part, are always predefined but to varying levels. On the one end of the axis, we have targeted surveillance that tracks just a certain individual or organization. And on the other hand of the axis, we have what is considered indiscriminate surveillance, in which the entire human population is targeted. However, even this indiscriminate surveillance actually predefines its target, as, for instance, it does not target household pets. With regards to the effects of surveillance, they also vary significantly. Surveillance is harnessed for a myriad of purposes and thus is said to produce very different effects. At the top of the list of declared aims, we often find desirable sounding goals such as security, fighting fraud, and care. But there are many more effects of surveillance, and even the just mentioned positive effects can be framed quite differently by other people. Moreover, beyond the desired effects, that is, those intended by the party initiating the surveillance practices have many unintended effects, some of them unforeseeable in advance. There are, of course, many more characteristics that apply to only some surveillance applications, and many ways to categorize different types of surveillance. Still, what all surveillance scholars find in common, and what binds the field of surveillance studies together, is the idea that surveillance is an interesting and fruitful perspective through which to study contemporary society.